All right. Our next speaker is Steve Desmond, who I've had the pleasure of working with across a couple of organizations for about 5 years. He is an innovative and brilliant developer, I can say from direct experience. And I am very much looking forward to hearing about what he can tell us all about. Yeah, there's an app for that, cross-platform native experiences for using open web standards. And with that, kind of nice, Steve.
All right, Eric just gave the first 5 minutes of my presentation, so yes, good afternoon. There's an app for that, creating cross-platform native experiences using open web standards. Eric gave a good introduction about myself, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm currently an enterprise application developer at Ithaca College, working primarily on the web side of things, though I do quite a bit of server and back-end work as well. Yep. So we're going to be talking about 3 things today. Number 1 is what I like to call native in the browser. I'm going to show you just how much you can indeed do simply with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Secondly, after that, we're going to look at packaged apps. So taking that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, packaging it into native packages, and installing it on mobile devices. And lastly, we're going to talk about when, why, all the other questions, why you'd want to do this as opposed to some other route. So without further ado, what is native? I think native, really, the description has changed over the past 8 years. The first iPhone came out in 2007, and the web was a very different place back then. The mobile ecosystem also a very different place. But things are, hardware in general is just so much more powerful than it was back then. So it's not, you don't necessarily need pre-compiled code on your device for it to be high performance. Similarly, with some of the new APIs in HTML5, there are a lot of things that start to integrate what was formerly a browser window into the rest of your operating system. So I like to define native as 3 things. 1, immersive. So it starts to blur the line between the, it's not you communicating back and forth with the server necessarily, but it's you interacting with your system just as you would if it were installed locally. Seamless, similarly, using device components, which you'll see shortly. And high performance I touched on, hardware is so much more powerful, but also JavaScript as a language is very high performance. You can do a lot of cool things with it, which you'll see. So let's start with immersive, full screen. I'm sure you guys have seen things like this with YouTube videos. You click the full screen button, it expands your full screen, it hides all the other distracting stuff. It's really as simple as this JavaScript element, any element, dot request full screen. When you want to leave full screen, document, it's always at the document level. Exit full screen. One caveat, this must be called from a short-lived event handler. That's the error that it will give you in the console if you try to do this any other way. So what does that mean? That means basically you need to wrap these in your own functions. So you can't say, try to go into full screen as soon as someone visits your page. There needs to be an explicit action that the user takes to allow them to do that. So here's an example right here. We have 2 buttons, one that says go full screen, which calls this go screen function, and one that says exit full screen, that ends function. So you can exit that, and you can see that this whole presentation is actually running in my browser. When you click enter full screen, it will always ask the user for permission. You'll see this is a recurring theme throughout the presentation. And it's something that you need to consider when you're writing, I'm going to call them apps. They're not necessarily installed apps, but they're still apps. When you're writing apps this way, is the user can deny. They can, this is full screen, but you'll see it with other things as well. So you need to accommodate for users who may not want to, for lack of a better term, have their privacy invaded. another big catch with full screen is everything stretches. So here we have an image that is clearly squishy. So what you want to do is you want to wrap things in divs or spans or something that would make sure to maintain the aspect ratio. So the same is true with video. YouTube, for example, if you go into their source code, you see they're not full screening their video, they're full screening a div that contains the video. Pretty cool, except it's not as easy as request full screen. We've got request full screen, we have MS request full screen, we have Moz request full screen, we have WebKit request full screen. Does this sound familiar to anyone? Very similar to CSS vendor prefixes. Basically, while these standards, APIs, RFCs, whatever you want to call them, have been in place for years, they're not yet finalized. So the browser manufacturers don't want to necessarily conform to an incomplete spec. Rather than needing to handle these all individually, enter msmozwebkit.js. This is a brand new open source library, quite similar to Modernizer, in fact, if anyone's familiar with Modernizer. Modernizer is more on the CSS side with a little bit of JavaScript. This is specifically for HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, HTML5 and JavaScript APIs. So basically, while these are the case, while you would otherwise need to do checking for each browser, for all of the functions you're about to see, or most of them actually, we're going to ignore that because we're going to use this library which abstracts that out for us. So we saw full screen. Next up, we're going to get a little more involved and take a look at geolocation. What is geolocation? It's actually quite a broad term. Basically, using some sort of information to figure out where in the world you are. GPS is the most common, but actually most phones do not have a strong enough receiver to act on GPS alone. So they actually use a GPS, assisted GPS or augmented GPS, which combines cellular triangulation. So it takes the GPS data, it takes, where are the cell towers, and it combines that to give you a more accurate data. Wi-Fi, Mozilla, and several other organizations have gigantic databases of Wi-Fi hotspots, Wi-Fi routers, and their physical location on the planet. So if, for example, you're on a MacBook Pro, which does not have GPS built in, you can still get your location. If you go to Google Maps, it'll ask you for your location. It'll probably show you that you're at the Statler Hotel. It does that because it knows that the Wi-Fi with the signature that the Wi-Fi here has is located here. Fused locations are kind of a combination of all of these, taking a GPS to the next level. Basically, really fine-grained. I know that this router is in this spot, so even though GPS says I'm here, it's actually a little bit closer to here. And there's also mock locations, which we'll see in a minute. How do you get your current position? Navigator.geolocation.getCurrentPosition. Here's an example. Here the callback is just dumping the position. Like I mentioned earlier, it's going to ask me for my location. I will share it. And it just gives you a JSON object with your latitude, longitude, altitude, accuracy, etc. So, who's ready to have some fun? So infomercials usually start with a grainy black and white video of someone having extreme difficulty trying to open a can or something really simple like that. That said, can I have a volunteer? All right, Brian, come on up. So this is Brian Irely. He's the Director of Digital Strategy at Ithaca College. And this is good because this link goes to Ithaca's website. And this is, of course, not meant to embarrass Brian or be the developers and designers of the Ithaca website. But Brian, could you please direct me to the nearest computer lab at the campus center?
That's a great question.
You can do it yourself, or
yes.
you can just...
Am I going full through, or is it just...
Yeah.
Okay. You want it on a map, or just a descriptive location?
Just pick a lab.
Okay. Let's go to Friends 110 Computer Lab.
All right, where's Friends?
Great question.
All these tweets. It's great.
There.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
So, what if I said geolocation? There's an app for that. We're going to use the same API that I just showed you. We're going to load a page, we're going to share our location, and bam, right like that, we see our location on campus, that mock location that you saw the JSON for, as well as the 4 computer labs, distances, times, all of this. Super simple, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Of course, pulling into Google Maps API. So really, if we're looking at, it's flipping the information, right? It's taking, let's figure all this stuff out ourselves to let's direct the user in a meaningful way. Expanding again, so full screen, was pretty simple. Geolocation, a little more involved. Let's go big. Why do we, as developers, do what we do? I'm going to hope that since the audio is busted, that this is loud enough that you guys can hear it. Here we go. Why do we do what we do?
We're making the world a better place. Through constructing elegant hierarchies for maximum code reuse and extensibility.
We're making the world a better place through Paxos algorithms for consensus protocols.
And we're making the world a better place for software-defined data centers for cloud computing.
A better place through canonical data models to communicate between endpoints. A better place through scalable, fault-tolerant distributed databases with ACID transactions, thereby making the world a better place.
So, not time for the mic drop yet. I started thinking to myself, how can I make the world a better place? And then it hit me. GitHub pull request selfie GIF automation. So, not sure the demographics in the audience. So GitHub is a public source control repository site that prides itself on community. A pull request is one way for you to get a change that you have made in code into someone else's version of that repository. Everyone knows what a selfie is. Animated GIF, I'm sure, is fairly common. What we're going to do is we're going to put all those words together onto a single page. Who GIFs? These are some examples. Phil Hack, who used to work for Microsoft, now works for GitHub. Great guy to follow on Twitter. Greg Franco and Chase West of Yahoo. You'll see there's a little plug for GIFshot, which is a library that I will be using. The Guardian. Yes, The Guardian. Just because you're not doing meaningful, serious work doesn't mean that you can't have fun while you're doing it. And there's actually a link down here if you go to the presentation. Afterwards, you can click on the link. It'll take you to a great blog post by Matt, who's holding the shoe in the bottom left corner, about the benefits of including this. So, Brian's has his turn. I'm giving you the steps this time, so it's a little bit easier. So, volunteer. JK, there's an app for that. So here we go. This is our pull request selfie GIF automator. It's asking me for my camera because obviously it wants to see a picture of me. So here we go. I request my camera. You can see it over there, right there. So I'm gonna say, hi, Ed Web. This is my first pull request, and I will do a little. Hi. You can see it's recorded there. I'm gonna submit the pull request.
Wow.
We're gonna go over to GitHub. Hey, look, here's my pull request. But that's not all. There's more. I'm gonna come in here on my phone as the maintainer of the open source project. And I'm going to merge the code change. There was some hard-coded stuff for presentation purposes, but I'm going to merge the code change and
Blame Red Rover.
yeah, I very well could. All right, I'll blame Red Rover. It's supposed to pass back a notification that the pull request was merged, but alas, Wi-Fi or something. So let's dig into the various pieces of that. We started off with the camera. Camera's pretty easy. Navigator.get user media. There's some options. It's just JSON. You can tell it if you want a video or a photo, resolution, things like that. And then you give it a success callback and an error callback. The success callback is what we'll focus on because the error really is, if they deny, say, no, you're not allowed to see my webcam. How do you handle that? So the success callback takes a string, and we'll keep that in our head for 2 minutes from now. Video, you saw the video that I played. Video requires no JavaScript at all. It's all HTML5. So we've got a video element with multiple sources. Why do we need multiple sources? Well, browsers do not have a common understanding of codecs. The colors aren't great here, but Opera is the only one that can handle all of these. And I know Opera gets a bad rap, but it's a pretty cool browser. These MP4s for Firefox and Chrome are in yellow because it depends on what the underlying codec is. So because there's some proprietary stuff that gets run, Firefox and Chrome are both based on open source products, and therefore there are issues around things like that. So what you want to do is make sure that you include more than one version of your video so that all of the browsers can properly handle things. Similarly, there's an audio tag. Same thing with WebAdmin OGG, limited support. MP3 and AAC over MP4 are common across all 5 browsers, so it's a little easier there. When we combine them, here's what we get. So we have this button down here, we'll go bottom up. Button calls the start webcam function. Start webcam function calls get user media, passing in the show video function. Show video says jQuery webcam, so there's a webcam element somewhere, .video source stream. And video source is just something in Moz WebKit that's doing the same sort of vendor prefixing sort of stuff. So when we click start webcam, it's going to ask us for a webcam, and then it shows up down here, so I can say hi. I can wave to you guys. We'll cancel that because we don't want to watch me the whole time. And we'll continue on our way. So the video gets recorded. It needs to get stored. So we have local storage. Really simple API. Get item, set item. It just takes text. If you're doing something fancy like image or video, you can base64 encode it so that it stays there. Differs from browser to browser, but you're usually limited to 5 to 10 megabytes per domain. Just something to keep in mind, so you don't want to be storing massive amounts of data. The other thing Just the difference, local storage is persistent over multiple sessions. Session storage, obviously by name, is only kept for the current session. Workers. Workers are, well, there's a worker bee, you can say workhorse. So we took that video that we had and now we need to convert it to a GIF. So we're going to do that in the background with a worker. So workers are fairly simple. You just say new worker and it's got its own file that it sits in. That file does not get run until the worker gets instantiated. And then it's just a matter of listening for an on-message event to happen. So for this example, it's going to call the handle worker message function, which is just going to dump whatever the worker is responding back. On the worker side of things, the only thing you do is call post message with text, and it'll send whatever is going on to anything that's listening to it. Here's a button. It says run worker. Let's run the worker. So it runs, it's doing its thing. These things are intended for long-running processes, and then when it's done, it just spits out the text. Notice I said text, but this is a JSON object. JSON is just text, so you can put whatever you want in here. Do some really, it says complex computations in the background, non-blocking for the user, and then once it's done, you can pass it back to them. For example, a GIF. Notifications, this part didn't work, but hopefully this part will. So we say notification.request permission, first of all, and this is just giving the response. Because this is running locally, it's not going to ask for permission. Firefox says if you're running it locally, you know what you're doing. And then so send notification just calls new notification with a title, a body, and right up in Firefox. Let's try this again. No notifications today. That's lame. Well, it's supposed to pop up in the top corner for OS X and the bottom corner for Windows. It's just your plain old operating system notification. On your phone, it's going to show up in your notification tray. And it's basically a way to, have some nice, simple OS integration to. Yeah, look, there's my notification. Just one more thing. WebGL. This is kind of the pinnacle of web performance. So WebGL is a web API to OpenGL, which is the Open Graphics Library. So this is the Web Graphics Library. Basically, 3D graphics in your browser, for the lack of a better term. So here we go. This is in the browser. Let's make it daytime so you can see it a little better. So this is doing complex calculations on the water. We've got a nice fancy boat that's modeled off the Black Pearl from Pirates of the Caribbean, and we can drive the boat around. Hopefully now you guys are getting motion sick from this. But this is all being done in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, we saw a whole bunch of features, all these guys. There are actually literally hundreds of them, hence the Pokemon reference. That link goes to the Mozilla Developer Network site, which has fantastic documentation on all of this stuff, should you so desire to look further. So, someone asks you, say, there's an app for that. It's the web. There is a disk too, by the way. So Apache Cordova. Apache Cordova is a command line utility to create native packages from HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are all the platforms it supports. That's a lot. Going back to the international presentation, we really have a duopoly here between Android and Apple, with Windows, sorry Tom, a little bit behind there.
Thank you.
International ecosystems are a lot more wide-ranging. Firefox OS, I don't know if anyone has seen my shirt, but really up and coming in third world markets because of the cost. It's completely open source, so the cost is low, and the devices aren't, you're not paying for a $600 phone. It's, you do what you need to do to access the web to make phone calls, and in some ways that's, how it should be. Friendly, familiar frameworks. This is my favorite stack on the front end, and I love that I get to use this when creating apps. I don't need to learn Swift. I don't need to, deal with Android's mess, for lack of a better term. I can use Bootstrap. I can use Font Awesome. I can use jQuery. I can use Angular with an asterisk because there's a little bit of gross stuff when they like to fight each other when trying to start up. But that's not to say there aren't fixes for that. So, want to get up and running with Cordova? Download and install Node.js. Node.js is a server-side JavaScript server, for lack of a better term, but it also is really big with developers because it has NPM, the Node package manager. So once you install Node.js, you run npm install Cordova with the -g flag for global, and that'll install Cordova, and you're done. It's there. For each project, you want to just call Cordova create whatever directory you want to put your new project in, and then you want to link it to an existing web app. If you don't do the linking, it'll create a Hello World app for you. But we're going to link it to things that have already been built. Once you're in that directory, you can just call Cordova platform add platform, any of those platform names that you saw before. You do need the SDK for that platform to be installed before you run this. Otherwise, it'll tell you that you need to have the SDK for that platform installed. So I've got iOS and Android running on here, and you'll see those in a minute. Cordova build, we'll build it. Cordova run, we'll run it. Let's give it a go, shall we? So I'm going to say, Cordova create pres. So I'm going to build my presentation. These I didn't put in there. But this is the Android namespace and the human readable name for the app. I add web presentation. I'm going to link it to presentation directory. Bam, done. Let's go in there. Let's see, Cordova platform, add iOS. It's going to get it. Add Android. Do it. Cordova build. It's going to build it for both. You can also say Cordova build platform name, and it'll do only for that platform name. We'll give it a minute because it's got to actually build it. And then once it's built, I'm going to Cordova run. You guys having a good time so far?
Yeah.
Alrighty, it's done. Cordova, run. Here we go. Here's my Android phone. My iPhone somewhere. Here's mine. Oh, it's an iPad. And it's too big for my screen. So we'll let those load for a minute, and then we will see presentation running on our mobile device. Ta-da! So there's yeah, you can see now. Okay. Let's hop over to Android, see if Android's done. Not yet, he's still going. But you can take my word for it, right? You can see the iPad version it's running. Still nothing. All right. So that's pretty simple. Move on to merges. So merges are a way for you to have, not necessarily tweaks, different code running on different platforms while maintaining the same singular code base. So yeah, platform-specific code stash. And all you need to do is just have a directory called merges/platform in there. So we're going to hop over to, this is Visual Studio Code. This is fairly new, but it's pretty cool. So here's an example app here, and it says hello world. You have a base CSS that's centering things, and we have a platform CSS. So I'm using CSS content just because. You can use HTML partials if you want. You can use JavaScript, jQuery to inject content. But basically you can see here we have an Android directory that has a platform.css for changing the color and content. iOS, platform.css changes the color and the content. All right. So, open a new tab. Let's do this again. Cordova, create, call it merge. Merge. And it's going to link to that one. Same thing. Cordova platform, add iOS. Cordova platform, add Android. I'm actually going to do one more. I'm going to Cordova add platform browser. If I were to put them in the right order, perhaps. Now, I'm just going to go straight to Cordova run because it will realize that it hasn't been built yet and it will run it. So here it popped up the browser, unfortunately Chrome, but you can see that it says hello default world. It's now building the iPad. And you probably can't see it because it's already scrolled. There we go. The iPad says hello iOS world. And if we wanted to wait for Android, which is probably disconnected or something, it would say hello Android world. And it would be green. So that's merges. Pretty simple, but you can get really complex. You can do vastly different things. The main thing I can think of is that these platforms have very different operating system user experiences. So Android, for example, the menu is always at the top left. iOS has the button bar on the bottom. You can emulate those using JavaScript, CSS, whatever you want, and you can have each platform do those things so that it seems more integrated into the system that it's running on. You can do that without needing to write a completely separate app for each platform. Plugins. Plugins are just about anything you can think of, from polyfills, for example, like geolocation on a really old Android device. It's not built in, so this plugin would handle that. Libraries, frameworks, things that make your job easier. The main use, though, is OS and device integration. So things deeper than the HTML5 web APIs can handle. Say you wanted to make a flashlight. You'd have to use a Cordova plugin to access the LED light on your phone because there's nothing in HTML to do that. There's a lot of them, over 1,000 in fact. You can browse the repo anytime if you want, see what's out there. Start moving it along. You can see my soapbox. Reasons to build a native package. There are many reasons why you would want to do this. Some are good and some are bad. I mentioned OS device integration, offline availability. If you have created something that does not need to talk back and forth with the server, it can just sit offline, right on the user's phone or tablet, or anything really. That's a good reason to not force the user to go out to the server to get what they need. Immediate access. So this is what people call home screen wars, and it's hardly marketing, but really companies trying to get in the face of users, for lack of a better term. So while it is possible to create a bookmark on your desktop or your home screen for a website, a lot of users aren't familiar with this, and so they're probably more likely to go to the App Store to try and find an app for your site or whatever than to create a bookmark on their home screen. But marketing is also a bad way to do it. Marketing comes to you, hey, we need an app. Well, why do you need an app? Is there an actual value to it? Well, everyone else is doing it. And of course, did you not see how easy that just was? So, all this talk, why the web? I mentioned single code base. You saw all of this, running. HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I didn't need to create a separate Android app. I didn't need to create a separate iOS app. It was all just built in. Common technologies. We all work with the web every day. Why not keep working with the web, even if it's not in the context of a browser? Friendly, familiar frameworks along similar lines. I don't need to learn Swift or Android's many layers of abstraction. No need for specialized staff. I'm sure a half-decent iOS developer is probably going to cost an arm and a leg compared to a rock star web developer, because there's so many more of them out there, and their skill set is much more broad. Minimizing investment in proprietary platforms. And here's where the soapbox really comes in. So Apple, for example, will reject your app from the App Store if you mention that it's available on a different platform. Android does similar things, but it's really a matter of, if you're going to pour thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars into something, only to have this other company say, nope, you can't do that, and rip down what you've done, you want to minimize your investment. You want to put all your investment into something open and cross-platform, and minimal investment in the proprietary stuff. There are, as it says, a massive number of open source communities for web libraries, frameworks, etc. They also exist for these platforms, but nowhere near the scale that there is for the web. So whether you're looking for an answer on Stack Overflow, or you're looking for people who are doing something similar to you and you just want to talk with them, there's loads of great opportunities to do that. Most importantly, I think, is freedom of choice for your users. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I go to a site and it says download our app. I don't necessarily want to make that commitment right away. And it is somewhat of a commitment. If they want to use your browser, let them use their browser. If they want to download the app, they can download an app, but not forcing them into one way or the other. What are some next steps that you guys can do? You can download this presentation and demo. The link is on the last slide. Start integrating some of the new web features that you saw. I know Adam mentioned potentially Google Maps into the Cornell Visit site. Build an app with Cordova. You can use that 6-step walkthrough that I showed you. Give it a shot. Contribute to MS Moz WebKit. It's a very new framework. It's very light right now. Even if the only thing you can do is provide a better name, that would be excellent. Here's the source code, link to the Mozilla Developer Network. HTML5 demos is a great, really bare bones site that does stuff similar to what I showed, but many more examples. The Apache Cordova site. My Twitter, if your questions can't be answered with any of these sites, feel free to tweet at me and I will do the best I can to get back to you. Any questions? I know that was a lot. Yep.
Could you put the presentation shortcut of the source code on the screen just so we can get the URL?
Oh, yep.
Thank you.
It's github.com/stevedesmond-ca, presentations, and then there's just a branch. And yeah, you can actually see, so this presentations repo is a fork of a framework called reveal.js, and that's what I was using to do it all in the browser. Anything else? Digest it for a little bit.
Wow.
One more thing, these guys, if you see them, I see Dave back there. I'm going to do it right now. Give these guys a high five. They did a great job. Nate's probably outside, right?
What's that?
Nate's probably up front. All right, cool. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.